My most precious timekeeper. There's a saying that goes, when you fully trust someone without any doubt, you'll either have a person for life or a lesson for life. You bet I learned a valuable lesson because that quote manifested itself into my life. It was the summer of 2000, before our beloved smartphones and social media even existed. Elio, Tara, and I were exploring the glorious Barcelona. Spain was our first stop on our trip across Europe to celebrate high school graduation. That's 18-year-old me. I'd always wanted a partner who I could trust with my life and stick with me through thick and thin. But the boys I dated were too childish or selfish to be considered trustworthy, except for my sweet Elio. He's always so attentive and cared for me greatly, but somehow he couldn't ease my anxiety. At the beginning, I wanted us to have a couples trip, but then I decided to have my only friend Tara join us, just to be safe. My treat, of course. Only Tara stayed friends with me after many other greedy leeches tried latching onto me for my family's wealth. Sure, I got you, girl. I was thinking you might just chicken out without me. Ha ha ha. She knew me too well. And so our journey began. Why Barcelona, you asked? Because I wanted to connect to my Spanish roots since my grandparents met, then got married over there. Hopefully, Elio and I would be just like them. After weeks of sampling Michelin restaurants, 5-star hotels, and high-end nightclubs, we visited Las Ramblas Market, and so did dozens of other tourists. Are they not seeing me intentionally? I can't suffocate between sweaty people, so I let us out of the crowd. Here comes fresh air. But hey, where are Tara and Elio? I reached for my phone and suddenly remembered that Elio had my handbag. My whole life's in there. My phone, my money, my passport. Police! Officer, please help! I'm lost and I don't have my documents on me. But why did they keep dashing their gaze to me, then to each other? Oh, they understood me. Then they signaled me to follow them, probably to the police station. What? This is a hospital. They think I'm nuts? No, this isn't happening. What do I do? Excuse me, you need help? That snapped me out of the panic attack. I turned around and saw 2 male supermodels. My. Hang on, time and place, Michaela. Turns out the guy who just approached me was Guzman. He's quite fluent in English and very friendly. Meanwhile, the cold one was Manu, who seemed to be watching me like an alien. I told him about my situation, then they led me to the U.S. Embassy. Luckily, they stayed to help me talk to the embassy staff, who I totally believe is the sloth from Zootopia in disguise. One eternity later, they said they'd help me find Elio and Tara, but it'd take several weeks. That's it? What about me? I already told them I had neither money nor passport, right? Where do I stay? How would I survive? Right then, Guzman offered me to stay at his place and work at his family's restaurant in the meantime. Huh? Isn't that too generous to a stranger like me? These 2 beautiful and helpful people could be baits, but without any other option, I had to cautiously follow them. This was the first time I ever had to be on my own in a strange place, and the fact that their home was an old, slightly shabby restaurant didn't help. Mr. and Mrs. Rios, the owners, aka their parents, welcomed and fed me. I wasn't sure if the food was poisoned or not, but my rumbling tummy convinced me to blindly trust them for now. Then they showed me my room. That's nice. Perhaps a bit too nice, especially to a complete stranger. Am I gonna get kidnapped like when I was 5? If it wasn't for my bodyguard, I'd be living in a human trafficker's wonderland now. This room's only secured by a simple slide bolt, so I used all my strength to barricade the door with this wardrobe. Whew, that'll do it. I couldn't sleep much and got up pretty early, but it took me a while to remove my barricade and get downstairs. Scratch that, or I might give myself scoliosis. At breakfast, they asked me how I was doing. I could only mutter a few Spanish phrases from school and prayed for my Spanish ancestors' assistance, while their replies were too fast for me to comprehend. Besides, it sounded like they used a different language to communicate. Sensing my confusion, Guzman explained that people in Barcelona speak Catalan in their everyday life, not standard Spanish. Oh, right. Suddenly, I felt so alone among them. Unsurprisingly, when they opened, I was assigned dishwashing duty and organizing the storage room because I didn't speak any Catalan. Back home, I had maids and servants pick up after my every step. Literally. So working here was torture. Not to mention the hot weather here was draining me. My slow pace earned me Manu's glare, his annoyed frown, or sometimes a few words that I'm sure weren't very nice. Fortunately, Guzman was there to be the usual comic relief. I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. De nada. You're doing your best, girl. Don't worry about that grumpy cat. Still, Manu was just one of my many problems. Everything seemed confusing, from how they tell the time to the metric system. Not to mention, mealtimes in Spain were always somehow 2 hours late. I swear, I almost blacked out from hypoglycemia the first few days. But today, Manu suddenly demanded I take a table's order. Maybe they sensed my nervousness, so they pointed at the dish they wanted from the menu. Gazpacho and pesto pasta? Got it! Call me Bear Grill. Improvise, adapt, overcome is the way to go. A while later, I was just vibing in the kitchen when I heard a commotion outside. I ran out and realized the customer from before was coughing violently. What's happening to him? I saw Mr. Rios ran up to his date, asked a few questions, and checked his half-eaten pasta. His face suddenly turned pale, and he immediately called an ambulance. Michaela, did you, by any chance, not hear that he said he had a nut allergy? Perhaps. He told me his food should be nut-free because he's allergic, but that went over my head. Thank God the ambulance arrived on time, so he was okay. Still, Mr. Rios had to apologize, and that meal was on the house. And me? Manu gave me a piece of his mind. Why is he angry at me? He knew I didn't speak their language, yet he made me take their order. I wish I spoke Catalan so I could fire him instantly. Guess I'll have to fire myself. Adios! I was walking around aimlessly when Manu and Guzman found me. They said they were looking for me everywhere. Manu's awkward expression was very unlike his usual cool appearance. Sorry, you not know Catalan, I not know English. We, misunderstand. Go home, please, okay? Now I knew this guy seemed cold only because he didn't speak English. Seeing their sincerity, I followed them back. But will I ever return home? What if I'll never see my friends and family again for the rest of my life? The next day, I went to the U.S. Embassy and received shocking news. Elio and Tara not only had already left Barcelona, but Spain. A week ago. Why didn't you inform me immediately when you found them? Oh, we were gonna do that tomorrow. They're gone anyway. What's so funny about that, you moron? Never mind. Burning this place down wouldn't solve anything. My world had already collapsed. What did I do to deserve this? Why am I surrounded by cruel people? My paranoia was proven right once again. I can't trust anyone but myself. I relayed the news to the Rios and asked if I could live with them longer. They reassured I could stay as long as I needed. They can't reach you now either. They couldn't have abandoned you. Maybe they were looking for a way to help you. Chin up, Queen. Your tiara's gonna fall. This family's hospitality and positive energy are unmatched. Still, it saddened me that I couldn't return home just yet. A few days later, surprisingly, Manu offered me Catalan lessons. In return, I shall teach him English. He was a natural. I, on the other hand, felt like I was born with a wrong tongue. Whenever Manu got mad at me for making mistakes, I'd bombard him with questions as a distraction. Why do you use Celsius and not Fahrenheit here? Why Catalan and not Spanish? And what's up with siesta? I swear, it's like the entire city suddenly drops dead in the middle of the day. At first glance, my questions seemed to annoy Manu, but he actually answered all of them. I could see his iciness slowly melting. Time passed and my Catalan improved. Today, I even chatted with Manu's parents while working. They said this restaurant was established a few generations ago, and many troubled couples stopped by this place. But love always prevails in the end, because our food heals them all. Might sound romantic, but actually, that's because great-granddad liked being a love guru, while great-grandma wished to be a couples therapist. Since then, thanks to Manu and my coworkers, my life got a lot easier. Every time I messed up something, they'd offer help or guidance. One time, I got lost while delivering food and was gone for a long time. But when I got back, they didn't criticize me. One of them even joked that I didn't know the area because I rarely went out. So Guzman suggested we three go to the beach after work. Some vitamin C sounds like what I need. Huh? But only Manu was waiting for me after our shift. It's just us. Guzman's with his hot date. Guzman, you cheeky little schemer. Still, this isn't a date, right? Just two friends getting to know each other. I initially thought we're gonna walk along La Rambla and arrive at Barceloneta Beach, but Manu took me to Playa Badalona, which was a bit further away, but pretty much empty and splendid. Strange how TripAdvisor didn't mention this place. Manu brought out a bottle of cava, a Barcelona specialty. Wow, isn't it expensive? Are you sure I can have this? You worked hard and deserve to play hard. Aw, so thoughtful. He might make me blush. Then we toasted to my chaotic arrival here. That's the stuff. With Manu, I got to see an ordinary side of Barcelona. Not often do I get the chance to be somewhere this beautiful. I should be more adapting. Besides, if I wasn't here, I'd never get to observe this magnificent monument up close. Leave room for Jesus! Jesus! I mean, Guzman? He had a terrible date and came to vent. What were you thinking, Michaela? You have a boyfriend, remember? Eventually, my life here got more enjoyable. I kinda adopted the mañana mentality, so taking it slow became my motto. I now realized whoever invented siesta was a genius. People would sometimes burst into songs, as others would either sing along or dance to the music. Spaniards seem to value quality of life more than those in the States. Speaking of which, I still got homesick from time to time, and Manu's the only one who seemed to notice. You can talk to me anytime. Rest assured, we're all happy to have you here. Okay, I might have a teeny tiny crush on him. No, focus, Michaela. Think about Elio, your boyfriend. I wonder how he and Tara were doing. Speak of the devil, I saw them again that evening on a TV show about tourism in Marseille, France. And they shamelessly claimed to be a couple. I couldn't believe it. However, without my passport, I couldn't get to them. So I asked Manu and Guzman to go there, and they agreed. Girl, don't worry. I'm more than happy to bring those traitors to justice on your behalf. No matter what had happened, I'll be eternally grateful to them. My guardian angels. They returned after a couple of days with my stuff, but Manu said those two showed no remorse as they put all the blame on me. The moment I saw them, I knew those two were backpacking. Trust me, honey, they're penniless. But I still had questions, so I immediately called Tara, and chaos ensued. Tara said my paranoia and stubbornness tired her out, as they did Elio. We kept it to ourselves all this time because we didn't want to hurt you, but actually, it felt like a relief to not have you around. Did you know that we bonded over shared trauma? That's you. Good. I hope you two are happy asking strangers for money together. Tara, are you talking to Michaela? Mickey, wait! I can't listen to another word. There wasn't even any tears left in me. Manu sat down next to me. Hey, you got rid of those traitors. Why the long face? I'm fine. Don't mind me. I just lost the only two people I trust outside my family. No biggie. Come now, it's not that bad. Give up! What the? Oh, oops, my bad. Don't give up. I mean, cheer up. Don't laugh. I mean it. Since you got here, you've become a lot more independent, haven't you? You're quite a strong, resilient girl. He's right, and not just because I like him. I'd been so caught up in everything that I didn't realize I'd been entrusting my life to him, who I barely knew. I'd been relying so much on him and his family. Maybe it's not so bad knowing good people still exist. And this guy, he makes it so hard for me to leave this place. At the crack of dawn, I woke up to the deafening sound of helicopters? That's my family crest. My parents must have sent those choppers. A swole guy in black came up to me and said my dad wanted me home because I'd gone AWOL for far too long. Then he just grabbed me and we flew straight back to America. I begged him to turn around so I could say goodbye to Manu, Guzman, Mr. and Mrs. Rios, my saviors, but my pleading was completely ignored. I was finally home and went to college, but as a different person. I was determined to socialize more and befriend new people. And no, it's not just talks. I actually moved into the dorm to be surrounded by my peers. It's been a long time coming, but I learned to open up and keep my trust issue in check. I shouldn't pass up on companionship out of irrational fears. However, I couldn't take my mind off Manu. We didn't even properly say goodbye and had no way to contact one another. So I went back to Barcelona to look for him. But when I got there, his family said he'd just gone to the airport. Turns out, he went looking for me too. I immediately got in a taxi and headed to the airport. As soon as I arrived, I saw the earliest flight to America had already taken off. That's how my time abroad wrapped up. Michaela, mi amor, where are you? Yes, my love. That photo album again. I'm right here, eyes on me. Well, I couldn't figure out why you didn't board that flight. I just had a feeling that I'd see you again if I turned around. Call it telepathy.
In every high school boy's story, there's always a drop-dead gorgeous girl who makes him do stupid things to try to win the girl over, right? Well, my story is pretty much along those lines, except I was competing with a dog. Yeah, you heard me. Here we go. So my name's Liam, and I'm 17. And Suzanne is the girl I was chasing. I remember the first time I laid eyes on her. It was during a football match at school, and she was one of the cheerleaders. Her bouncy blonde locks and her bright blue eyes drove me crazy, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. In other words, I was smitten. So that's when I started my pickup plan. I paid my friend $10 to find out her address and her favorite food. Stalk her much? Well, this was only the beginning. Once I had her address, I walked up to her house holding a strawberry cheesecake with a love letter attached to it. I peeked over the fence and was about to put the cake on the doorstep, ring the doorbell, and run away. But as I was walking towards the door, a dog appeared and jumped towards me. I freaked out and tried to run away, but instead I face planted in the ground, and of course, the cake landed right next to me and the letter flew away. What a disaster! Plus, the damn dog kept biting at my pants. Meanwhile, I was screaming like a little kid. And guess who appeared at that moment? None other than Suzanne. Noticing the cake and the letter with her name on it, she smiled down at me, helped me up, and said she had a first aid kit inside. She said her dog Loki just got excited when he saw new people. And then she kept apologizing, but I told her it was okay. And to be honest, I'd fall down like that every day if it meant I got to be helped up by Suzanne. After that, we started texting, although most of the time she was sending me photos of Loki. Finally, after a few months of texts, I plucked up the courage to ask her out on a proper date, and it was amazing. After dropping her off at her front door, I decided that was the moment to confess my feelings and ask her to be my girlfriend. I was shaking so much that I almost forgot to breathe. But luckily, she told me she liked me too. Then suddenly she grabbed me and planted a big kiss on my cheek. And so I held her and decided to go in for a proper kiss on the lips. But out of nowhere, Loki appeared and leapt on me and I fell flat on my face. Not again! And this time I was furious. I sat up and I was about to go crazy. But then I noticed Suzanne was laughing. Loki seems to like you, she joked. He's driving me insane, but seeing how happy she was made my anger all gone. I was about to stand up and go in for a kiss again, but Loki kept pulling Suzanne inside. She had no choice but to follow him. So I was left there all alone. Man, what was that dog's problem? After that night, I refused to go to Suzanne's house when we met up. I even told her I thought her dog hated me, and she thought that was hilarious. She then said he was just protective, and then she shared the story of why they adopted him. So when I was 8, my best friend lived next door. His name was Andrew, and Loki was his pet. The three of us were so close, but one day Andrew's parents got divorced, and Andrew moved to Canada with his dad. So he left Loki with me. It's been 9 years since we saw each other. A thought crossed my mind. Maybe Loki hated me because he thought Suzanne was Andrew's girlfriend. No way! He was just a dog, right? And the trouble was never ending. Prom night arrived, and Suzanne was so excited. I made sure I got to her house early and waited her for a while she did her hair and stuff. I told her I'd wait outside, but she insisted I come in. I was dreading seeing Loki, but of course there he was, waiting for me by the couch with a smirk on his face. I mean, come on, since when do dogs smirk? I sat there nervously watching him, but after Suzanne had gone back upstairs, he came over to me with a photo in his mouth. It was Suzanne sitting next to a boy, and Loki was there too. Obviously, it was Andrew in the photo, and they looked so happy together. Why was Loki showing me this? I looked Loki straight in the eyes and said, "Listen up, Loki. Andrew and Suzanne aren't together. Suzanne is my girlfriend, so just leave us alone, okay?" Loki just kept staring at me, then he left. It was clear I'd lost the plot. There I was threatening a dog. After a while, Suzanne came downstairs, and we were about to leave. But I couldn't find my shoes anywhere. After 30 minutes of looking, we still couldn't find them, and by then Suzanne was pretty upset with me. She ran upstairs and locked herself in her room. I didn't know what to do, so I got up to leave barefoot. When I got outside, I noticed Loki smirking again, but I wasn't in the mood to care about him now. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and it was Loki with my shoes in his mouth. He dropped them at my feet and then ran off. I couldn't believe it. That stupid dog stole my shoes and ruined our night. I spent the next week texting Suzanne trying to apologize, and eventually she forgave me. But I still hate Loki so much. He was seriously making my life a living nightmare. During the summer, Suzanne was going to Chicago with her parents to visit her aunt, so she asked me to look after Loki for 2 weeks. What? You've got to be kidding me. I had no choice but to agree. If I said no, I'd risk losing Suzanne. So when I went to pick him up, I saw him standing there smirking at me again. It looked like he was saying, "Oh, hey, Liam, are you ready for 2 weeks of hell with me?" The worst part was all the instructions Suzanne had for me about how to take care of her precious Loki. Feed him with organic dog food 3 times a day in his special bowl. Then make sure he gets 2 walks a day, no less than 5 miles each time. And every night at 6 p.m. he needs his bath with his doggy bubble bath. He likes to be massaged behind the ears. And please read him a bedtime story to ensure he has sweet dreams. This had to be some kind of joke. How would I remember all of that? And as expected from day one, it was a total disaster. It was summer vacation. So I wasn't going to bed early. In fact, I was playing video games with my friends all night. So I never managed to wake up at 6 a.m. to feed him. And surely he wouldn't die if he skipped a meal, right? But well, he didn't give me much choice. He leapt onto my bed at 6:30 a.m., licking my face and demanding food. Another time I was going to my friend's house, so obviously I couldn't take him with me. So before leaving, I said, "Hey Loki, be a good boy, I'll be back soon." Then I smirked and locked the door. Loki started barking, so I knew he was angry. Well, it served him right. However, when I got home that night, I discovered he'd peed all over my clothes and messed up my entire room. He'd clearly done this to get revenge, and I was fuming. I started yelling at him as I was cleaning up the mess. And that's when I realized that I'd have to take him everywhere with me. Even though he was super annoying, I started to understand why Suzanne loved him. He was smart, affectionate, and I guess it's kind of nice to have company. When I was watching movies alone, he would come over and lay in my lap. When I played video games, I could ask him to bring me snacks. And once I went to the toilet and realized the loo roll was finished, and I shouted, "Loki, can you please get me some loo roll?" And he actually brought me one. A few days later, we were out walking in the park, and I saw some boys playing basketball. I was desperate to join them, so I told Loki to wait for me. But after the match, he was nowhere to be seen. I freaked out and frantically searched the whole park, but it was hopeless. Suzanne would never forgive me if I lost her precious Loki. So the next day I put up some flyers hoping someone had found him. Well, luckily for me, someone called me and said they had found him. I immediately went to get him and waited outside the address they'd given me, which was in a kind of dodgy part of town. While I was waiting, 2 men dressed in black clothes approached me. They looked suspicious, so I tried to step out of the way, but one of them grabbed my arm and said, "Give us your money, otherwise you might get hurt." I started struggling and trying to get away. But this made them even angrier. I freaked out when suddenly I heard a familiar barking. Loki! He was rushing towards us and started biting at the robbers' clothes, pulling them away from me. I was so relieved, and after a while, the robbers ran off, scared half to death. I gave Loki the biggest hug, and he was wagging his tail in delight. Then a woman with a dog came towards us. Turns out she was the person who had called me. She'd been walking her dog Penny in the park when Loki had started following them and wouldn't leave Penny alone. He'd been smitten with her, so Penny's owner didn't know what to do and took Loki home. Eventually she saw the posters, and that's when she'd contacted me. So Loki was as bad as me, chasing a pretty girl. How funny. When we got home, I thanked Loki again for saving me. Then I said, "You know Andrew doesn't live here anymore, right? He's in Canada, which is far away. But listen, I love Suzanne so much, and I know you do too. So we'll take care of her together, okay?" He kept staring at me like he was waiting for something more. So then I said, "Oh, right. Yeah. If you agree, I promise I'll take you to Penny's house to visit her. Deal?" I reached out my hand to shake his, and he legit put his paw in my hand. Okay, done deal. A few days later, Suzanne got back and picked up Loki. And when I told Suzanne everything that had happened, she burst out laughing. After that, our relationship got even better, and we started hanging out with Loki more. Although whenever I wanted to kiss her, I always said to Loki, "Hey bro, look away." And he never once tried to interfere again. Loki and I are on good terms now, as he's in love with Penny as I am with Suzanne. It's true what they say, boys go wild for pretty girls.
Would you ever let yourself become so wrapped up in hatred that you change your entire life to get revenge on someone? Well, that's exactly what I did, and it didn't exactly go to plan. I'm Clara, and I'm 25 years old. It all started 5 years ago when my boyfriend Jason went to study abroad in France. We were so in love at that time, and it wasn't easy being apart, but we coped surprisingly well. Jason even promised me we'd get married when he got back. But after a few short months of him being away, he started growing distant. He no longer called me every day, and he barely even replied to my texts. I thought maybe he was just too busy and stressful to deal with his new life, while struggling with missing me. So I decided to do something wild and fly to Paris to surprise him on his upcoming birthday. I hadn't really thought about it. I just excitedly got on the flight and taken a taxi to his apartment. But, well, the moment I saw him walking into the lobby, I instantly regretted it. There Jason was, but he wasn't alone. He was hugging and kissing some other girl, and she even went upstairs with him. I felt my blood boil, and I wanted to scream, but instead, I just left. I was so upset, but I was also angry. How could he betray me like that? Going a long way just to see my boyfriend betraying me right in front of my eyes was a bad thing, and I didn't think life could get any worse. But I was wrong. Things were about to get much worse. After leaving his place, I booked myself into a nearby hostel and cried myself to sleep. The next moment, I was waking up to a burning smell. Oh God, the hostel was on fire! I was lucky to make it out of there alive, but I was badly burned and left with a huge scar on my face. There I was, heartbroken and burnt to a crisp in a foreign country where I knew no one and didn't speak the language. I'd never been so lonely and ugly in my life. As I looked in the mirror, all I felt was anger and resentment towards Jason. He destroyed my life, and at all costs, I would make him pay for it. After I'd recovered, I got on the plane and flew back to the USA. That's when I started plotting my revenge. I had a few things up my sleeve, but first things first. Plastic surgery. So, as soon as I graduated, I got myself a full face rework. I even changed my name, moved to a new apartment, and lived with a new identity. My life was miserable enough, so now all I wanted was to start all over again. And it worked. After the surgery, I turned into a completely different person, just like I'd wanted. And what's more, I was even more beautiful than before the accident. I felt incredible and couldn't wait to start living again. Of course, I had to work my ass off to pay off my plastic surgery, but it was worth it, wasn't it? More than that, that was also how I tried my best to build a career for myself. Jason would regret cheating on me for the rest of his life, that's for sure. And as planned, after 3 years of working hard, I eventually got promoted to a management position in the construction company I worked for, and became a beautiful, successful woman that many people admired. At the same time, a few of my friends mentioned that Jason had finally returned from Paris and was now working for a big architectural firm. I almost laughed when I heard the company's name. That was our new partner company. Oh, things were about to get fun. My friends also told me that he'd brought his French girlfriend back to the USA with him and that they were getting married soon. What? He was about to get married? They seemed so happy together, huh? No wonder that for all these years, he hadn't tried to contact me once. After I caught him cheating, I just disappeared. I could have been dead for all he knew. But he didn't seem to care. This made me hate him even more. There was no way a traitor could live happily like that. I couldn't wait any longer. It was time to put my plan into action. So I told my boss I'd work on the project with Jason's firm. At least this way, I'd have an excuse to approach him. At that first meeting, I made sure I looked as beautiful as possible and waited with bated breath. Of course, Jason didn't recognize me. And well, would you believe it? He kept looking at me and flirting with me. I found it hilarious and so kept flirting back. And eventually he got the hint and asked me out. What a jerk! Now I understood why I was abandoned in the past. Even when he already had his fiancée, he could still flirt leisurely with others. His poor fiancée! I kept playing along, and even made plans to befriend his fiancée, Valerie. I knew she hung out in a certain cafe, so one day I went there and accidentally bumped into her, dropping water all over her gorgeous outfit. I kept apologizing and told her I'd paid to get it dry cleaned, and eventually we started chatting and hit it off. We exchanged numbers, and I asked if she'd like to go shopping sometime, which she agreed to. This was way too easy. A few days later, we went shopping, and it didn't take long before she started confiding in me about how lonely she was, and that other than her boyfriend, she didn't know anyone here. I smiled sweetly and told her I'd happily be her best friend. At the same time, Jason and I were dating. I pretended to fall for him, even though inside I was furious at him. I even told him I'd share some confidential work documents with him if he pampered me and treated me like a princess. He seemed totally in love with me and spent all his spare time taking me out to dinner and buying me expensive gifts. It seemed like he was no longer interested in Valerie. Obviously, Valerie came to me and told me that she was very sad because the wedding was coming soon, but her fiancé was just cold and acting weird. On the one hand, I comforted and encouraged her, but on the other hand, I seduced Jason and took most of his money. He'd even put my name on the house contract, so technically, I owned his place. You know, I wanted Jason to feel the pain of being betrayed by the person he trusted. Then one day, Valerie called me in tears and said she suspected her boyfriend was seeing someone else. I asked her what her boyfriend's name was and where he worked, and said she didn't need to worry. I'd help her find out. A few days later, I sent Valerie a few photos of him cheating with me, but obviously, I hid my face. However, it was just enough evidence to make her suffer. Then I told Valerie that it looked like her boyfriend was working with this other girl on a project, and that Valerie could get her revenge by destroying the project. That way, he wouldn't be able to work with this other girl anymore. Valerie totally fell for it. It was insane. The very next day, I heard from my colleagues that Jason's crazy fiancée had destroyed the final layout for the design of the two companies' project. She spilled water on his laptop and threw it onto the ground. While the deadline was coming, it was too late to start it over. Apparently, Jason's boss was fuming and fired him immediately. This contract was worth millions of dollars, and he'd just ruined everything. I had to give it to Valerie. She didn't even think about it. That's how dumb she was. Served Jason right. Finally, karma had come and bitten him in the ass. That evening, I went over to their house. Jason now has no job, no money, and he was about to lose his fiancée and his house, too. I knocked on the door, and when Valerie opened it, she was shocked to see me, but not as shocked as she was about to become. Jason saw me and looked like he was going to pass out. "Surprise!" I said. "Hi, Jason." At this, Valerie looked confused and said, "Wait, do you two know each other?" I just laughed and said, "We sure do, Valerie. In fact, I'm the other woman who he is cheating on you with. And that's not all. I'm actually Jason's ex." Then I turned to Jason. "That's right, Jason. It's me, Clara. Valerie, when he came to Paris, he was dating me, and then he cheated on me with you, so I've been getting my sweet revenge." Both of them looked completely stunned, and instead of shouting at me, they started fighting with each other. Valerie was screaming. "How could you?" Jason shouted back. "You're crazy! If you hadn't ruined my laptop, things wouldn't have been like this." "Oh, really? If you hadn't cheated on me, I wouldn't have done that," Valerie said, while bursting out crying. Pretty soon, she found out that the house belonged to me now, and all of his money, and that's when all hell broke loose. I just stood there, admiring how great my revenge had played out. Eventually, they broke up with each other, and I decided to kick them out of the house. So my cherished revenge plan for the past few years has been successful. However, there was just one problem. The price I paid for it wasn't small. When I showed up at work the next day, everyone was whispering about me, saying the project I'd been working on had been a complete failure, and that it was all because I seduced the guy from our partner firm, even when he was about to marry his fiancée. It was a disaster. My reputation was ruined. I couldn't handle everyone being against me, so I resigned. I decided to spend some time at home for a while, trying to clear my head. I didn't get it. I'd spent years plotting my revenge, and now that it had finally been a success, why did I feel so bad? I'd been so caught up in ruining Jason's life. I hadn't thought how it would affect my life too. I'd been delusional. Above all, the joy and satiety of watching the two of them move out of the house was just temporary, and what remained after that was just a feeling of emptiness. What had I been doing? I was just ruining people's lives, especially with Valerie. She was so innocent in all of this. How could I have been so cruel? Then one day, as I was walking down the street, I saw her at the bus stop, and she looked so sad and thin, and it tormented me. That poor girl didn't deserve this. I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. I had to apologize, so I raced across the street. But by the time I got there, the bus had come, and she had gone. I decided to call her instead. I asked if we could talk, and at first, she refused. But once I said sorry and told her how terrible I felt about everything, she agreed to meet me. I was holding the keys to her old house, and as she walked towards me, I handed them over. She was surprised, but then I started to explain. Valerie, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. It's just that Jason broke my heart, and for years, all I thought about was destroying his life the way he destroyed mine. I didn't realize you were so sweet, and now I see how awful I was to you. You don't deserve any of this. You trusted me, and I completely betrayed you. At first, Valerie didn't say anything. Then she started shouting at me, saying she'd thought of me as her best friend, and that she felt so pathetic for trusting me. At this point, I burst into tears. I was a monster. The minute I started crying, something changed in Valerie. She hugged me. I couldn't believe it. After everything I'd done to her, she still wanted to hug me. We were there hugging and crying, and yep, finally something good had come out of all this mess. I had a friend, and very quickly, this friend will become my best friend for sure. You guys, honestly, I don't recommend wasting your time on revenge. I threw away so many years of my life obsessing over hurting Jason, and in the end, it just hurt me and poor innocent Valerie. From my own experience, I just want to tell you that always be the bigger person and live for yourself, not for others. Sometimes in life, we do things we might not be proud of. But honestly, if I had to go back and do it all again, I wouldn't change a thing. Please listen to my story and let me know if you think I did the right thing. It's been a crazy ride. I'm Delilah, and I grew up as an orphan. When I was only 5 years old, my parents were arrested as they belonged to some kind of mafia. I didn't have any relatives, so I was sent to an orphanage. I was too young to really understand it all. I just thought my parents were so busy with work, they didn't have time to take care of me. But later, I understood that my parents were bad people, and that they'd often hit me and even starved me whenever I was naughty. Over the next 4 years, I was adopted by 3 different families. The first 2 didn't end so well, so they sent me back. But the third family was really nice. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on our side, though. There was a car accident. I was lucky enough to survive, but my adoptive parents didn't make it. I was devastated and got sent back to the orphanage. I didn't understand why I was so unlucky. It really felt like the universe was punishing me. Years passed by and no other families adopted me. So as soon as I turned 18, I left and decided to start on my own. But it wasn't easy. I'd had no real education and I couldn't find a decent job. I did a lot of random jobs, like pizza deliveries, handing out flyers on the streets, and working in a supermarket for a bit too. The money was never enough, though. I hate to admit this, but sometimes I stole groceries from work. However, one time I got caught, and of course, they fired me. That sucked. How would I be able to make it to tomorrow with $2 in my wallet now? I vented out with my coworker Casey about how miserable my life would be without that job. Then Casey just smirked at me and said she knew another way I could make some money. She said it was just a one-time thing and it would be risky, but the money would be enough to last me for years. I was eager to hear more, but you won't believe what it was. The job was to kidnap the daughter of a rich family and then demand ransom. Casey said all I had to do was take care of the kid for a few days in an abandoned warehouse, and when the parents paid the ransom, they'd send the kid back, and I'd be free to go with all the money. I mean, it sounded easy, right? It's not like I was actually kidnapping her. I was just taking care of her for a few days. More like a babysitter, so nothing could go wrong, right? The little girl was called Lisa, and she was just 2 years old. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, were well known, and they were stinkin' rich. The plan was actually so simple. Every Sunday, her nanny took her to the playground, and so that's where she'd be kidnapped from. You're probably wondering if it worked out. Well, I'm not in jail right now, so there you have it. I was waiting in the warehouse, and they delivered Lisa to me. Now, all we have to do is wait. The warehouse was pretty shabby, but it had enough to survive. And at first, Lisa cried a lot, and I seriously couldn't get her to stop. I tried playing her Baby Shark on YouTube. Believe it or not, it worked, and she stopped immediately. Later that night, though, Casey called and said Lisa's parents refused to pay and that the police were involved. Oh my gosh! So now what? They couldn't just leave me here with this random kid. The only option Casey could think of was that me and Lisa should hide out at Casey's grandparents' farm for a couple of years. That's when the case died down and everyone had forgotten about it. We could just leave Lisa outside a police station. This was insane! But what choice did I have? Lisa's face was now plastered on every newspaper and webpage. Also, not to mention the fact I knew nothing about raising a kid. What a disaster! But hey, at least I'd get to move to a farm. So the next morning, Casey's cousin, who drives vegetables from the farm to the city, picked us up and drove us safely to the farm. It was perfect, because Casey's grandparents didn't own a TV or the internet, so they knew nothing about the missing kid. Casey told them I was a single mom and had nowhere else to live, so they warmly welcomed us and said in return I could help them out on the farm. Those first few weeks were torture. Lisa was so naughty. Every time I fed her, she'd throw her food around. And once, she threw a hot bowl of soup over my head. After that, I was tempted to let her starve. I couldn't handle it. To be honest, I hated her. I regretted so bad getting involved in this mess every time I saw her face. But then one night, she was lying on the bed, and I was impressed. She'd finally chilled out. I went to wake her up to take her down for dinner, and she was on fire! I started panicking and went to find a thermometer, and her temp was 39 degrees Celsius. I had to get her fever down. I asked Casey's grandparents to help me buy some medicine for her. I was seriously panicking because she was shaking now. I just picked her up and held her in my arms, and I realized I would protect this little girl no matter what. She looked so innocent, and I actually felt my heart open up to her. We must have fallen asleep because I suddenly woke up an hour or so later and was relieved to see her body temp was back to normal. After that, I felt closer to Lisa. And honestly, she was pretty cute. Soon, I was sewing her little dresses and cooking her favorite foods. We actually had so much in common. We both loved mac and cheese, hated carrots, and were addicted to chocolate. Pretty soon, a year had flown by, and Lisa was starting to speak. And then she started to sing. And oh man, she's the most adorable thing on earth. Then one day, she turned to me and said, "Mama." I almost cried. I felt so happy, but it wasn't right. I had to give her back to her parents. She didn't deserve to live a life away from them, like I had with my parents. So I did something crazy. I saw Lisa's parents were looking for a part-time maid, so I used a fake name and applied for the job. I wanted to see if it was safe to take Lisa back without getting caught, but it was immediately clear that something wasn't right. It was like they didn't even miss her. I mean, imagine if your child had been kidnapped. Surely you'd be crying a lot, right? This family was different. All they seemed to do was work. It was so easy to sneak around their house. They left for work at 9 a.m. every morning, and would only come back at 7 p.m. The only one I had to be careful of was Mrs. Garcia, the housekeeper. One day, I was searching for Lisa's room to see if I could get some of her toys, but I couldn't find it anywhere. There wasn't a single room that looked like it belonged to a 2-year-old. Had they seriously already packed up her room? Just given up hope? So, I decided to search the basement, and jackpot! I found a box full of toys. But that's not the only thing that was there. There was a crumpled up photo, too. I got curious and unfolded it, and saw a little girl in the photo. I froze. That little girl wasn't Lisa. She was about 5 years old and looked familiar. It's like I've seen her before. Could it be? Is that me? But why did Lisa's parents have a photo of me? Suddenly, Mrs. Garcia appeared and said, "What are you doing down here? I knew there was something fishy about you. I'm going to call Mr. Taylor." She quickly took out her phone and was about to dial his number. I grabbed it from her, but oh man, this old lady was strong. We were fighting over her phone, and then she let it go. She looked shocked and pointed at me, then in a trembling voice said, You are Delilah, aren't you?" I was stunned. How did she know my real name? Oh God, she must have known I'd kidnapped Lisa. I was probably about to go to jail. But then she continued speaking, and I thought I was going to faint. Lisa's parents were also my biological parents, which made Lisa my sister. Mrs. Garcia had recognized me because she saw the scar on my arm, which she said I'd got from falling out of a tree. She'd worked for my family since before I was even born. But then she said something that shocked me even more. "Don't come back to this family, Delilah. Please, it's for your own good. If you stay, you'll be in danger like poor little Lisa. They didn't care about her at all. They often left her starving, and then she got kidnapped. They haven't even bothered to look for her. They're cruel and heartless, and all they care about is money. Having a kid was just part of the cover-up for them and their illegal business. I really hope Lisa is in a safe place now. Anything is better than this family." Oh my God. This was seriously crazy. After all these years, I'd finally found my parents. But deep down, I knew Mrs. Garcia was right. If Lisa and I came back, our lives would be hell. Before I left the room, I asked Mrs. Garcia one last question. Did my parents look for me when they got out of jail? Mrs. Garcia shook her head sadly. Let's be honest, though. I knew the answer before I even asked. So I went back to the farm and continued to take care of Lisa. Now that I knew she was my sister, I loved her even more and promised myself that I'd give her the life she deserved. It's been 10 years now, and we're doing great. Our parents did do a bit of searching for Lisa, but only for like a month. Then they gave up. Mrs. Garcia had been right. They didn't care about Lisa or me. When it felt safe, Lisa and I moved to Canada. I started to work in a few different places and even took some classes. Turns out, I have a passion for plants, and I can thank my time on the farm for that. So I opened a small plant shop, and the business is going so well. Lisa is my motivation. She's the reason I work so hard and keep fighting for our lives. And now we're happier than we've ever been. When Lisa turns 18, I'm going to tell her everything. But for now, I'll let her think our parents aren't evil people and that they're just busy working in another country. So, what do you think? Would you agree I did the right thing? I think I did.
Do you believe in fate? Well, I never did. I'm a 21-year-old college student studying finance and banking. So, yeah, numbers are my forte. Therefore, I'm a logical thinker. Horoscopes and chance meetings? As if. But then I met someone who changed it all. I'm Kai, by the way, and let me tell you my story. It all started one evening while studying. I got a serious craving for some Cheetos, so I went out to get some. That's when I saw a petite girl shouting at two huge guys in the park. Hey, Bigfoot, did you really just litter? Pick it up now or I'll give you a good going over. Oh man, did this girl have a death wish? And was she drunk? The two guys didn't look happy. They approached her and one of them even raised his hand up like he was gonna hit her. But she quickly pushed his hand away, which only made him madder. Man, I didn't want to get involved in this. So I pretended I hadn't seen them and walked off. But then I was just a few steps away, I heard one of the guys scream. And the other guy said, "What the? Gross!" I could have just carried on walking, but nope, my curiosity got the better of me. So I turned around and saw that one guy was covered in vomit. Then the girl pointed at me and said, "Honey, there you are." Then she fainted. Huh? I didn't know her. I was staring at them, looking perplexed, when one of the dudes yelled, "Why are you still standing there? Quickly take your crazy girlfriend home if you don't want to taste my fist." I was so scared I hurried over and carried this girl off. I had no idea who she was or where she lived. This was crazy. I placed her down on a nearby bench and looked around for those guys, but luckily they'd gone. I didn't know what to do, so I left her there and walked off. But then I started to feel bad. Was I too heartless? What if something else happened to her? So I went back and gave the girl a piggyback ride back to my house. Jeez, she was so much heavier than she looked. As soon as I dropped her onto the couch, her phone rang, so I answered it. "Hello?" Then the person on the other end of the line asked, "Who are you? Where's my friend?" I muttered out my address and was about to tell her to come pick up her friend, but she already hung up. Why was she so rude? I'd almost bust my back carrying her friend to safety. How annoying. This night has been far too dramatic for me, and worse still, I didn't have any Cheetos. I decided to take a shower, then get some sleep. But as soon as I stepped out of the bathroom, the doorbell rang. I presumed it must be the girl's friend, so I answered the door. Then two cops immediately pushed me against the wall and handcuffed me. Before I could fathom what was happening, one of them said kidnap and assault accusations had been made against me, and I was escorted to the station. What? I tried to explain what happened, but they wouldn't listen to me. That night, as I sat in the cold, uninviting cell, I found myself regretting my kindness. I didn't sleep a wink. I just hoped the next morning came quickly so that I could confront that girl about this false accusation. But before I could do that, the cops released me at dawn. The girl had sobered up and told them it was all just a misunderstanding. Well, luckily, she still remembered a bit, or else I didn't dare to imagine it anymore. I swore I would never get involved with anyone in need ever again. No good deed goes unpunished, for real. A few days later, when I was watching TV, someone knocked on my door, and you wouldn't believe it. It's the drunk girl. I looked at her suspiciously. "What are you doing here?" The girl didn't say anything. Instead, she coldly slipped past me and entered my house. Huh? What was she playing at? Then she glared at me and asked me about that night. After I told her everything that happened, she laughed. "Okay, I believe you. If I didn't, you'd know about it." She held her fist in front of me. I startled and almost fell off my chair. Then she chuckled. "Now I'm hungry. Go make your guests some food." What was with this girl? She was so direct and bold. I glanced at her and said no, but she continued. "If you don't, I'll go to the cops and change my statement." Then she got up to leave, so I quickly said, Okay, fine. Then reluctantly searched my cupboards for food. Trusted spaghetti, how you never fail me. So I prepared bolognese for us. While she was eating, she said, "I'm Nora, by the way, the best screenplay writer major in the country." She winked. She thanked me for the food, then left. Phew, that'd be it now, surely. Nope, turns out this was just the beginning. The next morning, she texted me, "Come pick me up for college ASAP, else I'm calling the cops." Was she being serious? Then she sent me another message with her address and told me to hurry up. I rushed over there and she got into my car, glared at me, and said, "You're late." And that's how I somehow became this Nora girl's servant. Her calls and messages could come at any time. And she would always force me to do things for her straight away. One time I was soaking in the bath when she texted and demanded I bring her some chocolate. Another time she called me at 2 a.m. and told me she was bored, so I had to come over and play some video games with her. I also became her unpaid Uber driver. Every day, from home to school and back. And it's inevitable that I overslept once, so Nora bombarded my phone with tons of texts and calls. I groggily answered, and she used her calling the cops threat again to force me to get there in 15 minutes. What a pain in the neck. Another time, I just stepped out of the house to go and hang out with my friends when Nora showed up and insisted that I had to take her to the cinema. She wouldn't take no for an answer, so I had to cancel on my friends and go watch some bland movie with her. Such a troublesome girl, right? But strangely, as time went by, I started to find Nora less annoying, and instead found myself smiling when she texted me or called. On the days when she didn't bother me, well, my mood seemed to dampen. Was I crazy? I mean, she was cute, very spontaneous, and, well, there was no one else quite like her. But then all of a sudden the messages and calls stopped. Did she not want me around anymore? I miss Nora. Many times I had to stop myself from calling her. I should be happy I was out of Nora's control, right? Then one day out of the blue, my phone beeped. It was Nora. Come to the Starbucks on Vincent Street. Move it. You have 5 minutes. Geez, that bossy tone again. Still, I immediately drove to the address. When I got there, I saw Nora with a guy and a girl. I walked over to them and just sat down. Nora held my arm. Honey, why are you so late? I stared at her in surprise. She smiled and turned to the other two. This is Kai, my boyfriend. What? Did I get it wrong? Did she just say I was her boyfriend? Then she said, Kai, this is my former bestie Kim and her boyfriend Greg, who's also my ex. Awkward, right? But I have you now, so we can all be friends. Reading the situation, I realized I had to go along with it. So I stroked her hair and said, yes, my honey muffin, anything you want. My cheesy lines seemed to work, as they both looked annoyed, then left. So I turned to look at Nora and stammered. Did you just say I'm your boyfriend? Nora said nonchalantly, yeah, isn't that okay? If you don't like it, forget it. Then she was about to leave. I pulled her hand and said, yes, of course, sounds great. So that's how we became an official couple. We went on a few dates, and she was her usual demanding self. Not that I'd want her any other way. Then one time, after a month of dating, Nora dragged me to a Swan Lake in a nearby park. She looked at me for a long time and then said, Kai, I'm studying abroad for a year. I leave tomorrow. I glared at her in surprise and asked why she hadn't told me sooner. She continued, I guess I didn't want to make you sad, and I don't know if your feelings are big enough, so write down your feelings for me and give them to me tomorrow. That night, I carefully wrote down all my thoughts and feelings for her. I still had hope that this 1 year of long-distance love would be over quickly. The next day, I drove her to the airport and handed her my letter. To my surprise, Nora also gave me a letter and told me over and over that I could only read it when I got home. Of course, I obeyed her. Then read it as soon as I passed my door, and whoa, I wasn't expecting this. In it, Nora confessed all this time she was just using me to get revenge on her ex, and took advantage of me to get over him. That night we had first met, she found out about him and Kim, but now she regretted how she treated me. At the end of the letter, she wrote, if fate wants us to be together, then we'll meet again one day. What? I was so shocked, so I called to tell her she didn't need to feel guilty and that I forgave her. I kept calling, but it didn't work. I also asked her friends, but no one knew how to reach her. She disappeared from all social media, and just like that, she vanished from my life. I missed Nora so much and found myself hoping that fate would reunite me with her someday. Then one time while I was surfing YouTube, this web drama called My Destiny Is Yours caught my eyes. Curious, I decided to check it out. And I watched wide-eyed as my story with Nora played out in front of me through each episode. This definitely was written by Nora. But how would she end it? It stopped at the part where the girl left and cut off all contact with the guy. An announcement popped up on the screen. The finale was launching at 9 p.m. tonight. I anxiously watched the seconds tick by. During the last episode, the two characters met up at a Swan Lake. I had a hunch, so without a second delay, I immediately ran to the Swan Lake in the nearby park. My heart flipped when I saw a girl standing there. It was Nora. Man, I ran so fast and hugged her. She hugged me back, then said, I was a little nervous you wouldn't see the movie. Then she smirked. But it doesn't matter anyway. I could have just texted you, come to the Swan Lake now, and you would have come, right? Then we both burst out laughing and continued to hug each other. Well, you see, fate brought me and Nora together, and this logic-loving skeptic is now a big believer in destiny. How about you? Have you found your destiny yet?
Hey, I'm Henry, and I'm a 23-year-old from Hamburg, and I have one question. You must have heard of K-pop, right? So, any K-pop fans in the house? Of course, I'm one. To be specific, I am an ARMY, a true BTS stan. Oh, and for those who don't know, stan is slang for when you're a big fan of something. Anyway, I can proudly say I'm obsessed with K-pop, and it's such a fun journey, right? But not everyone gets it. In fact, this is my story about how people treated me for being a fanboy, and it gets pretty dramatic. So, people always think that we like K-pop just because the idols are good looking. But no, that's not only it. Seriously, I bet those who hate K-pop haven't even given it a proper listen. So you K-pop haters, just hear me out, and I'll start by tracing all the way back to the beginning of that life-changing moment when I first discovered K-pop. It all started when my classmate Chrissy was watching this music video called Dope during recess. I got curious and joined her. And oh boy, I never seen something so incredible before. The camera work, the choreography, it was unreal. I couldn't get the song out of my head, and the video was so much fun to watch. They didn't need hot girls nor supercars to make it eye-catching. It's pure talent only. After that, I started to listen to more K-pop and became a multi-stan, but BTS is always my one true love. I love them, and I wouldn't mind sharing all about it on my Instagram, which also helps me make friends with a lot of other ARMY from all around the world. Mostly girls, but a lot of guys too. And they often message me saying how much they admire me for being so open about my love for K-pop. They say they wish they had the same courage I did, since a lot of them got made fun of for liking Korean male artists. How ridiculous is that? It's 2021. We can like who we like, and we shouldn't have to keep quiet about our passions. However, I totally understood how they felt. I've been there, and it was rough. One time in high school, I'd been so excited to show Chrissy my new BTS album. We were screaming and squealing as I carefully flipped through each page as if it was my most prized possession, when some jock walked by with his crew and snatched it out of my hand. Then he said, "What is this tween magazine? Didn't they all have plastic surgery, right?" Then another guy said, "Why do you like these guys? Are you gay or something?" Then they all walked off laughing. I was so angry I wanted to kick them so far off the earth, even Google wouldn't be able to find him. But I couldn't do anything. They were way bigger than me and would crush me into a pulp if I even tried. So I came up with a better idea. I started going to the gym. I wanted to be buff like Jungkook. Then I wouldn't be afraid of any losers picking on me and my boys anymore. Oh, and by the way, I'm not gay. That's just another thing us fanboys have to deal with. There's nothing wrong with being gay, but just assuming I am because I like K-pop is silly. K-pop is for anyone and everyone. Anyway, after high school, things were looking up as people in college were less nosy. We'd all grown up, and you won't believe how muscular I'd become. Girls started showing interest in me, but there was only one girl I had eyes for. Her name was Kayla, and she was so cute. However, there was just one tiny problem. And by tiny, I mean huge. She didn't like K-pop. Once when we were studying, she sat closer to me and asked with a smile, "What are you listening to?" Then she took one side of my earphones. "What is this? Some kind of chanting?" Then she just went back to reading with a disgusted look on her face. What? That was my bias. Rap Monster was spitting fire. I didn't know she was that tasteless, but I let it slide this time, since I didn't want to make a big deal out of it in the library. After that, things got worse, and her hatred for K-pop became more obvious. Every time I talked about it, she rolled her eyes and changed the subject. And when the new music videos came out, and I couldn't wait to show her, she'd just scroll on her phone and ignore it. Other than that, she was always so sweet, and so we kept on dating. But we shouldn't have. One time, we were hanging out at the mall, and it was a pretty special day for me as it was BTS's debut anniversary. I was so excited and had even worn my BTS crossbody bag with a Koya keychain to complete the look. I thought I looked cool, but Kayla burst out laughing when she saw me and said, "OMG, did you borrow your sister's bag or something?" I tried to explain to her and said, "No, it's mine, and this is my baby Koya." But she just cut me off and rolled her eyes, as she said we'd be late for the movies. She kinda killed my vibe, but it was BTS day, so I wouldn't let anything ruin it. We were lining up to buy popcorn when I felt someone tap me on the shoulder. "Excuse me, I couldn't help noticing your Koya. Are you perhaps an ARMY?" I finished his sentence with a scream. We were both excited. We basically talked in gibberish that probably only ARMY could understand. Turns out J-Hope was his bias, and his name was Craig. Then he even gifted me some photo cards he'd just printed out. I was so immersed in the conversation with him, I forgot Kayla was even there, until Craig said to her, "Oh, hey, who's your bias? I might have some cards for you too." Kayla looked offended and said, "You guys are sick. What a pair of losers. I've had enough of this K-pop stuff." Then she stormed off. We were left stunned, but oh well. If she couldn't respect my hobby and love me for who I am, then fine. Good riddance, Kayla. After that, Craig and I went to a cafe to talk everything BTS, and until this day, We're still good friends, and I'm grateful he saved me from dating that awful girl any longer. After that relationship, I gave my love life a bit of a break, as I was busy with streaming music videos, voting for BTS on award shows, and catching up with all of their content, on top of studying. I was perfectly happy living my little fanboy life without any girl, but then one day, everything changed. I was on the bus to class because I wasn't feeling well enough to drive after a white night watching BTS's live stream. I must have dozed off because the next moment I woke up and I was leaning on some girl's shoulder. I quickly apologized to her and she just giggled. Then I took a proper look and oh my gosh, I've never met such a beautiful girl in my life. She was like a mixture of all 4 members of Blackpink. Luckily, I was smart enough to ask her for her number and offered to buy her a drink to make up for almost drooling on her shoulder. After class, we met at a Starbucks and immediately hit it off. Her name was Clara, and she was so smart and pretty. I gotta make her mine. So I decided to change my tactic a little. I would wait a bit before telling her I was a fanboy. And instead, I focused on finding out more about her first and making it clear I really liked her. Then, when the right time came, I'd share with her my passion for K-pop. Pretty soon we got quite serious and did everything together, and I finally felt the moment had come. I was driving her home and decided to put my K-pop playlist on. To my surprise, she looked interested and asked what it was. I told her how much I loved it, and then nervously asked her, "Are you really okay with it?" Because usually when I tell people, they make fun of me. She just smiled and said, "Okay, now it's my turn." Then she put on some death metal, which almost made my hair stand on end. She laughed and said, "I know how you feel. Death metal isn't everyone's cup of tea either, but hey, we're allowed to like whatever we want, right? I respect that you love K-pop." Oh my gosh, could Clara be any more perfect? I can't wait to show her my room too. But unexpectedly, on the night I invited her over, her face changed as she saw all my posters and merch. I showed her my collections, my dolls, my pictures, but she just smiled and stared at me. Then she took my hand and said, "Henry, this is really cool, but don't you think it's a bit much? I know you love them, but you should maybe start spending your money on stuff for your future too." Then she told me she wanted to go home. Can't deny that I was hurt, but I knew that she's the one for me, and she just needed a little time to really understand that this was more than just a hobby for me. So I was determined to get her to like K-pop. I started sending her songs and recommending her some Korean shows to watch. Once, I even pretended I was taking her out for a picnic, but I took her to an army fest. Clara went along with it all, but she didn't seem too interested. Then came the best news ever. I found out BTS was going to have a concert in London. I was desperate to go and told Clara about flying there for the concert, but she said, "Henry, isn't that the same day as our marketing contest? There will be headhunters there and everything. You can't miss it. This is your chance to secure a good job." I didn't care and replied with a joke, "But I've been waiting to see them my whole life. This is a dream come true. Who needs a job when you have BTS? I'm going to London, baby." But Clara didn't laugh. In fact, she got super angry and started shouting at me saying that I was so immature and that if I didn't grow up soon, she couldn't be with me anymore. She was even crying, saying she needed a responsible man who was thinking about his future as she stormed off. After that, she gave me the silent treatment. I was stuck in a dilemma. It was my biggest dream to see BTS live, but why did this feel so wrong? I decided to wait a few days to think it all through, and eventually I realized there would be other concerts, right? I really couldn't skip the contest. I mean, how else would I support BTS without money? I did need a job. So even though it broke my fanboy heart, I told Clara I'd skip the concert this time and go to the contest. Clara immediately grinned and said, "Really? I'm so proud of you, Henry." Then she gave me a big kiss, and I reminded myself this was all worth it. And at least I still had my girlfriend. But suddenly Clara started speaking again. "Henry, there's something I need to tell you. Actually, Professor Geller has told me that the contest has been put off temporarily. So this was just a test." Then she said she just wanted to see if I could figure out my priorities. She loved how passionate I was about K-pop, but everything needed balance, and she wanted to make sure I would take other parts of my life as seriously as I took K-pop. Then she handed me her phone and said, "Look." I couldn't believe it. It was 2 tickets to the BTS show. She'd bought them for me. I was so happy I burst into tears and couldn't stop hugging her. I thought that was the happiest moment of my life. But the BTS concert was, especially as Clara was by my side. We're currently still together, and guess what? She even biases gin now. She's seriously the perfect girl for me, and I can't wait to spend my life with her. If in 2031 you ever see a family of 4 screaming their heads off at a BTS concert, chances are it's me and Clara and our future kids. Don't be shy. Come say hi.
Family. They're complicated. Right. I used to think my family was happy as can be. Nope. Just like when a water balloon gets too big and then explodes, Mom and Dad split up just after one big, fat, dumb fight. After that, my dad moved out. Me and my little sis Katie were given a hard choice. One of us would stay here with Mom, and the other would go live with Dad and his new girlfriend, Zara. Katie's really sweet, kind, and sensitive, so I didn't think uprooting her life and making her live with some new stepmommy would be a good idea. I'm a big bro. Protecting my little sis is what I do best. So when it was settled, Katie stayed with Mom, and I moved in with Dad and Zara. Fast forward a few months, and Mom fell in love with some dude named Glenn and married him. I wasn't sure about Glenn. I'd only met him a couple of times, but he seemed too smug for my liking. Anyway, back to Dad's, it turns out my life with them was a breeze. They let me go out when I wanted, barely made me do any house chores. Instead, Zara was not a mean person. She treated me like family. And for my 16th birthday, she even suggested my dad to surprise me with my very own car. Happy days. But there was one snag. From my sis's messages, I sensed things weren't quite so rosy with her. So I went around to show her my new car. Well, really this was just an excuse to go and check things out. I strolled into the house to find Katie emptying the dishwasher. She was crying. I mean, I know house chores suck, but they weren't bad enough to bring someone to tears. Something was up. I made her a drink, and we both sat down and talked. She told me that it was Glenn. He didn't like her and kept getting her into trouble. Katie said, "He always considered me as a thorn in his eyes because he wanted Mom to spend full time with him. He demanded that I do all the house chores, and then when Mom got home from work, he'd say he did them. If I tried to question him on this, he'd get me into trouble by telling lies to Mom about me. Such as one time he said I cursed at him and stole $20 from his wallet." I didn't like the sound of this, so I asked her, "Have you tried telling Mom what's going on?" She nodded her head and blubbed out, "Yes, she says I'm just lazy and jealous." I replied, "Sounds like Mom's blinded by love. Don't worry, sis, she'll come around and see sense soon." She sniffed back tears and said, "I hope so, Rory, as things really suck here." I told her to let me know the next time Glenn did anything sneaky. Whoa, turns out this guy likes to play dirty. A few days later, he switched the cooking oil for whiskey, so when Mom started the cooking, the whole thing went up in flames. Then Glenn rushed to the rescue and blamed Katie, saying he'd seen her holding the whiskey bottle last night, but presumed she was just trying to sneak some. Then he told Mom that Katie had insisted he cook her steak, so the prank must have been meant for him. Mom instantly believed him over Katie, and punished her by making her miss her school dance and having to do house chores instead. Poor Katie, she was so upset. But then a week later, sneaky Glenn struck again. This time Katie saw him switching Mom's diet mayo for the full fat stuff. Katie rushed to get Mom to catch him red-handed, but when she arrived, she saw him spreading diet mayo in her bagel. Mom shouted at Katie for saying untrue things about her stepdad and grounded her again. This sucked. My sis was the sweetest girl, and she doesn't deserve this. Not to mention the fact that some of these pranks sound dangerous. Well, not so much the mayo one, but the fire one could have ended so badly. This Glenn dude needed to stop with the games, and it was about time I showed him that no one messes with my little sis. So I suggested we switch things up for a couple weeks. Katie would go and live with Dad and get to know Zara, and I'd go and live with Mom and get to know Glenn. It's clear Glenn knew he couldn't mess with me, so for the first week he stayed out of my way. I used this time to refuel, relax, enjoy Mom's cooking, and plot my revenge. When the second week arrived, I was ready to make Glenn's life a misery. Tough lucky, Glenny boy. Mom was working extra hard as Glenn had lost his job. So, being the good son I am, I drove her to the grocery store. Mom was so happy with my help, and she promised to make my favorite omelet. When we got home, Mom called Glenn to come and help carry the bags inside. He tried to impress her by carrying them all at once, but one of them split open and groceries went everywhere, including the box of eggs. Oops! Mom was furious and shouted at him. "That's what you get for trying to show off and be a strong man. Now I can't have an omelet for my dinner, and I was looking forward to that." Haha, seeing his dumbfounded expression was so funny. Yep, I cut a hole into the bottom of the bag so that would happen. I wasn't finished with him yet, no chance. So in the next few days, when Mom left super early for work, I poured cornflakes everywhere, threw dirty laundry onto the floor, put the dog bowl on top of the couch, and stomped around in my dirty sneakers. I even took the breakfast Mom had prepared for Glenn to school with me, so I knew he'd wake up hungry, then spent all day having to tidy up my mess. Ha! Naturally, Glenn wasn't happy with me, so when I got back from school, he forced me to mow the lawn. This guy looked so tired spending the entire day clearing out my stuff, so fine by me. As when Mom came home and saw me, I gasped for breath and said, "I had a busy day with schoolwork, but Glenn still made me do all the chores. I'm so tired, Mom." Mom rushed inside and found Glenn watching cartoons. Then she yelled at him, "You're home all day, so why don't you mow the lawn instead of making my son do it? I had to go to work. My boy had to do the chores. So what exactly is your role in this house?" Glenn was speechless. It didn't end there, as Mom was so mad she made him sleep on the couch. Glenn avoided me after this, but that wasn't enough. I had to make sure that he'd leave my sis alone. I needed to make Glenn realize that his jerky ways were wrong. I knew Mom and Glenn had a piggy bank in their room for their future kid fund. So when they weren't around, I snuck into their room, smashed open the piggy bank, and hid the money in Glenn's jacket. That night after dinner, I asked Mom if I could borrow her headphones. So she went into her room to grab them. Just then, Glenn grabbed his jacket and was about to go somewhere. The moment he stepped out the door, we heard a frantic scream upstairs. It was my mom. She must have found the broken piggy bank and ran downstairs, yelling at Glenn. He stood in the doorway confused, but then she checked his pockets and voila! There was the money. She angrily waved it in front of his face. "What's this, huh? You're gonna go out spending the savings for our kid, right? You're making no money, so stop ruining everything." They took their argument outside, and I went up to my room and watched through the window. Suddenly, a car pulled up, and out stepped this well-dressed girl. Oh wow, it was Katie. She ran over to Mom and hugged her. Then, Dad and Zara appeared. Turns out Katie had had a great time at Dad's. Zara had always wanted a daughter, so when Katie came, she was so happy and had taken her shopping, got her hair done, and spoiled her. When Mom looked at her own daughter having a better life with her stepmom, I was pretty sure she realized how bad she was. I could see her ashamed face. I rushed downstairs and greeted my sis. Then I turned to Mom and said, "Mom, you should care for Katie more. You see, Glenn even treated me badly. You don't know how hard he was with her. We love you, so please trust Katie like you trust me." Then I turned to Glenn. "You're her husband, but it doesn't mean you can replace us in our mom's heart. Mommies always love their children best. Don't be childish and try to separate them or I'll come back." I winked at him. "Yeah, okay," he grunted. Then he turned to Katie and said, "I'm sorry, Katie. What do you say to us starting again?" Katie smiled sweetly and said, "Okay, I'd like that." It looks like I'd saved the day. Now Glenn knew that if he ever messed with Katie again, then I'd be back. After that, Mom still made Glenn do all the chores, but Katie, being the sweet girl that she is, helped him out with them. As for me, I went back to life at Dad's. I went around there more often to check on Katie and give Mom a lift to the grocery store. And Katie even came around for barbecues and to have a girly pamper session with Zara. So in the end, everything worked out, and now we're one big, crazy, dysfunctional family. But hey, as long as everyone's happy and doesn't try to mess with my little sis, then it's all good with me.
Do you know what it's like to be a pampered princess? Well, I do, because my dad's a billionaire, so the high life's mine. Not only did we live in a 5-story mansion, but I grew up never having to lift one of my pretty, perfect, delicate fingers. I'm Sophia, and throughout my childhood, I had everything done for me. There was a maid to brush my hair, make my bed, and even do my homework for me. I didn't even have to search my walk-in wardrobe for a daily outfit, as I had my own personal stylist for that. So what? I'm spoiled, but I can't help being so perfect. I'm far too gorgeous to be stuck in a stuffy classroom studying, not when I could be partying or schmoozing with the stars at swanky cocktail balls. But then, one morning, after a particularly crazy night out, I arrived home with a makeup-smudged face and only one shoe, Dad frowned at me, and then he said, "Sophia, you can't carry on like this. You're going to college, starting next week." "But, Dad, I don't need to go to college. School sucks. Plus, we have enough money to last us several lifetimes. Let's just travel and have fun." But Daddy insisted I couldn't just sleep all day and party all night. Ugh! So, I decided to major in interior design for now. Some of the course was okay. I mean, I liked the pretty fabrics, but I just didn't see the point in being there. So, after a month, I dropped out and planned a long trip away with my besties. But there was one tiny problem, as paying for this trip would cost way more than my allowance could cover. So, I had no choice but to don my best puppy eyes look and ask my dad for money. "Daddy, please. College just isn't for me. But I really feel that going away for a while will help clear my mind." He snorted. "I highly doubt that, Sophia. You're lazy, self-centered, and you rely entirely on everyone to support you. You're 20, for God's sakes, so act like it." I pleaded back. "But Daddy, I just want to have some fun with my friends." "Then get a job and spend your own money on whatever you like. But if you carry on behaving this way, then don't expect any more handouts from me. You're lucky that I still haven't kicked you out, Sophia. But soon." "What? That's so unreasonable. He was my father. It's his duty to support me. Jeez, did he not love me at all?" I was so mad that I shouted, "You're just some sad, selfish old man!" Then I stormed out of there. I was instructing my maid to pack my suitcases when my mom came in and handed me a bank card, saying it's a secret between us two. "Yay! Thanks, Mom. Now let the dream voyage begin." Wow, it really was heaven to me, with cocktails in the pool and lazy beach days. Well, at least, that wasn't until my friends said they wanted a day exploring. It was hot and sticky out there, but I didn't want to be left alone, so I reluctantly tagged along. We ended up in this small forest area, and I chose to sit under a parasol while my friends went to take a dip in the nearby waterfall. Because, duh, I wasn't ruining my hair for anyone. I didn't understand how this could be anyone's definition of fun. I just hoped that my friends would hurry back. Then I heard footsteps. I turned around, thinking it was the girls, but instead, there were two men with balaclavas on. Oh no, this couldn't be good. I jumped up to my feet and began to run, but my designer sandals weren't made for swift exits, and soon they caught me. I screamed out as a smelly cloth went over my mouth. After that, the world began to darken around me. I flickered my eyes open. Jeez, it was so sunny. Where were my sunglasses? That's when I heard two voices, and I remembered being kidnapped. I heard the one man say, "Got her phone?" The other replied, "Of course. I don't want to upset the boss." I was so scared that I pretended to still be unconscious. Then suddenly, I heard the sound of the engine starting. I opened my eyes and saw the men driving away. Now, I was all alone in some field. What? Why would anyone kidnap someone, then just leave them in the middle of nowhere? My friends must be so worried about me. I needed to contact them. But how? I had no idea where I was, and no phone. Ugh. I should find a way out of this deserted place first, then borrow someone's phone. The kidnappers had left a bag next to me, which had a bottle of water, some snacks, and some gross-looking sneakers in it. Yuck! But I had no choice but to put them on, as my sandals were now torn. Ew! I would need so many pedicures to recover from this. I took the bag with me and started walking. After what felt like hours of torture, a farmhouse finally came into view. I whooped with joy and knocked on the door, but no one answered. I know trespassing is wrong, but this was an emergency, so I pushed the door open and ventured inside. I was just going to make a quick phone call, then I'd leave. But then I accidentally stumbled and knocked over a vase. A smashing sound broke the silence. I panicked and was about to run away But from upstairs, a man came down and shouted, "Stop! Thief!" Before I could explain, he grabbed my hand and pulled me back. I tried explaining that I wasn't a thief, but he gave me a skeptical look and said, "Well, in that case, you can leave once you've paid for my vase. That's a collectible." What? This ugly thing? Ugh. I told him I would as soon as I made a phone call, so he doubtfully passed me his cell. I stared at it. Turns out I have never cared to remember any of my friends' numbers. I then thought about calling my parents, but no way. I was mad at Dad, and asking for his help right now only meant accepting defeat. No, never. I told the man I would pay when I got home, but he refused to let me go. After a while of arguing, he forced me to stay and work for him until I paid it off. He even made up an agreement and made me sign it. And what other choice did I have? Yep, I was completely stuck here. This was the worst day of my life. He said his name was Manson. Then he showed me where I'd be staying. This had to be a joke. It was a barn. Literally. There was an uncomfortable-looking bed in there, and I could hear horses neighing in the barn next door. Was he kidding me? I was sitting there in despair when my stomach rumbled with hunger, so I barged into the kitchen and ordered Manson to make me some food. But he just pointed at the eggs by the stove and told me to make myself something to eat. Sure, I'd definitely do that. If I knew how to cook? Manson just sat there smirking while I threw the whole egg into the pan and then spent the next half hour trying to work out how to turn the stove on. In the end, I gave up and returned to my so-called room with an empty stomach. If you think that was bad, well, things soon got a lot worse. At 5 a.m., a noisy rooster woke me up, and then started my disastrous days at the farm. I accidentally dropped the bag of seeds onto the floor and got them in my hair, so the chickens chased me around the pen to get to them. I slipped over in the pigsty. Ew! I chipped a nail cleaning out the rabbit hutch. I even fell into horse manure. It was awful. Then on top of it all, Manson was so rude. He just laughed at me struggling with everything. But then one day, it all got too much for me. I was exhausted and felt so dizzy that I stumbled and broke 2 baskets of eggs. It really hurt so bad, and I was even in tears, thinking Manson would be mad. But instead, he ran over to check on me. Then, he even cooked me a nice meal and told me that I'd been doing a great job, despite the accidents. Whoa, what's with this personality change? So, maybe he wasn't as bad as I thought? Over the next few days, I actually found myself enjoying Manson's company. We sat by the fire pit and watched the sunset. We went horse riding, and I managed not to fall off. And he even taught me how to cook. That's when I realized 2 things. Firstly, I'd been a brat. I was lazy, selfish, and I took everything for granted. But now I realized that with hard work came reward. And secondly, I realized that I liked Manson a lot. So I decided to do something nice for him. I gave the barn a makeover. It was just simple things, really. I put a rug down, added some plants, hung up a few pictures and fairy lights. Then I dragged Manson over to have a look. He peered around the barn, then smiled. "Sophia, this is so lovely." Then he awkwardly looked down at his feet. "Look, I need to tell you something. It's your dad. He hired those men to kidnap you, then paid me to let you stay here." I laughed over that ridiculous joke, but then he continued. "Your dad wanted you to change your outlook on life and understand the value of money. He only has your best interest at heart." Wait, was this all just a setup? With teary eyes, I looked straight at Manson and said, "I was going to tell you that I have feelings for you, but I suppose you don't feel the same. I need to go. Please tell my father to send someone to pick me up ASAP, unless he's okay with me walking all the way back home without any phone or cash." Then I hurried out of there. He shouted after me, but I ignored him. I was so angry and upset. I continued walking until a car eventually pulled up alongside me. It was our family's driver. He took me home, then I locked myself in my room, refusing to come out. It took a few days for me to calm down enough to go confront my father, and when I did, well, I found myself running into his arms and telling him how sorry I was. He looked so shocked. I finally realized that my dad only did that because he loves me, and he wanted me to see the true values of life. I told him I would resume my studies at college, but there was something else I needed to do first. I showed up at Manson's doorstep with some carrots for the horses and a new vase. On seeing him, he grinned, then gave me the biggest hug. Guys, life isn't all about designer clothes and expensive holidays. Sometimes a stinky farm full of even stinkier animals and a cute guy, well, that can be the best place in the world. As for the future, well, Manson and I are both taking it slow and seeing where it goes. I do have big plans for his farm, though. I'm helping him renovate the barns into holiday cottages so other people can sample the country life too. A part of me will always be a pampered princess, but as for the other part of me, well, it turns out she can make a mean egg bagel and outrun a pen full of chickens. Don't take life for granted. It doesn't matter how pretty and rich you are. Instead, there's far more to life than just that.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about my most memorable summer. It involves a parent-free house, the girl of my dreams, and my little bro Silas's massive secret. Actually, Silas doesn't want me telling you about it, but this story is too fun to keep it for ourselves. So stay tuned, let me tell you what happened. Imagine the scene. I'm there eating corn dogs when my parents announce they're going away on vacation for their 20th wedding anniversary. That means I'll be home alone all week long in our big farmhouse surrounded by vast fields. Sounds great, right? But wait, it got even better when my childhood friends who had now lived in another city were also back in town for the summer vacation. Of course, my parents let me invite them over to stay while they're away. That's how close our families were. Oh God, I haven't seen Carl in over a year. And his sister Ellie too. Yep, I wouldn't say that I had the biggest crush on my best friend's sister, but there's that. Anyway, this was gonna be my summer paradise. But you know, man proposes, God disposes. It turns out my parents weren't taking Silas with them because they thought I was old enough to look after my little brother. Ugh, what a bummer. How was I meant to impress Ellie when I had a whining kid to care for? I needed to think fast. So as soon as we waved our parents off, I passed my PS4 to him and said, Silas, you can play on it, but only if you promise to do as I ask and stay out of my way. Of course, he agreed. I mean, what 8-year-old boy wouldn't want to play Fortnite? I checked on him now and then and gave him juice and snacks. Other than that, I had plenty of time to spend hanging out with Carl and Ellie. Things were going well for the first few days, and nothing beats being around your best bud and your crush all day long. Whoa, I just couldn't take my eyes off Ellie. She seemed to have gotten even more beautiful. Then, on one evening, we were sitting outside stargazing. It was so romantic, especially when Carl thought it was dull and left us to go to bed first. I was about to do the whole yawn and stretch out my arm to wrap around her shoulders trick when Silas appeared and squeezed in between us. I glared at him and through gritted teeth asked him what he wanted. He just shrugged and said, Edward, I'm bored of that game now. I want ice cream. Ellie laughed, then led him off to get some. What? How dare that little dweeb ruin my smooth moves? What a buzzkill! I needed to come up with a new trick to handle this annoying kid. So, the next morning, I told Silas that if he wanted to download a new game of his choice, he needed to go into the field and find a corn cob with exactly 200 seeds on it. He looked like he was going to cry, but he went off to the field. Oh, how smart I am, sending my little brother on a wild goose chase. I expected him to give up after a few hours, but nope. He was out there searching for it all day. He even managed to drag Carl along to help him. In the end, he still had to leave empty-handed. Anyway, I have to thank my stupid brother for helping me to have such a good afternoon with Ellie. That night, we all sat together in the living room and told creepy ghost stories. I hoped Ellie would freak out so much she nestled into my lap for protection. So I told him about the empty house up the road, which was also our family's property. My grandparents used to live there, but now it had been abandoned for over 40 years. There were plenty of rumors about it being haunted. One farmer said he saw a ghostly woman by the window, but she vanished into thin air. And someone else said they saw a spooky figure float out of the house and chase after them. Ellie chuckled, then said, "Ooh, spooky. We should go and check it out." What? This wasn't what I had in mind. In fact, she didn't seem afraid at all. I didn't want to go in there. It was old and creepy, and just thinking about it freaked me out. Luckily for me, Silas strongly discouraged us by saying that he had heard someone crying in that house, and our parents didn't allow us to go there. And then, from nowhere, I felt the chilly wind blow over me with a whistle, which made my hair stand on end. And boom! The lights went out, leaving the whole room in darkness. Everyone was confused. What on earth was going on? I didn't want to die now, not when I haven't even told my crush my feelings yet. I was lost in terrifying thoughts when the lights came back on, and everyone else immediately bursted out laughing. OMG, I found myself sitting on Ellie's lap with my head between my hands. It turns out that my evil little brother was the one who turned the lights off as a prank. How humiliating. Oh well, at least Ellie changed her mind about wanting to check the house out. But then, over the next few days, weird things started happening. I went to grab a snack for my secret loot under my bed, but what's this? All of the Snickers bars had gone. It couldn't have been Silas, as he hated Snickers bars, right? Then we were watching a movie. Ellie started shivering, so being the awesome guy I am, I went to get a blanket for her, but huh? All of the blankets had gone? When I went back and told Carl and Ellie about it, Ellie said that was odd, as the other day she couldn't find her pajamas, and Carl's pack of Gatorade had vanished too. So, is there a real ghost in my house? As for my bro, he was acting like he was haunted. He barely talked anymore, and for 3 days in a row, at 6 p.m. on the dot, he disappeared out of the house for hours. This was so strange. I mean, that's the time slot for his favorite show, and he seriously wouldn't miss Adventure Time without a good reason. For me, it's great that Silas isn't at home, but since I'm the older brother, I still have to keep an eye on him, as Mom and Dad wouldn't have been best impressed if I'd lost him or something. That night, he mysteriously disappeared again. I was quite curious, so I went to look for Silas but couldn't find him anywhere. Panicked, I raced around the garden calling out his name. Finally, I felt a hand pounding on my shoulder. My heart was in my mouth. I turned around to see Silas standing there sweating. I shouted at him, "You can't just run off without saying a word. Where have you been?" But Silas calmly replied, "So what? It's my business, not yours." Then he ran straight inside. He gotta be kidding me. Okay, then if secrecy was the game he wanted to play, then I wouldn't mind being the detective either. I had to figure this out. So I gathered Ellie and Carl and came up with a genius plan. The next day at lunch, as planned, Silas entered the kitchen and everything was set. I placed an eye-catching candy-filled jar on the table, and as expected, Silas immediately picked up a handful and put them right in his mouth. Oh, just look at his happy face. He had no idea what I had in store for him. Right after that, we entered the room. Not wanting to get caught eating food on the sly, Silas quickly hid under the table. And of course, we pretended not to know he was there. Then I held up that candy jar and said, "Guys, guess what? I've ordered these pills online. It's the legendary invisible candy that makes it impossible for people to see me." Carl acted surprised. "Unbelievable! How did you get this? I heard it's such a hit that it was sold out everywhere." Then Ellie asked me how long we could disappear if we ate these candies. I replied, "I think if we just eat 4 to 5 candies, we can disappear for 45 minutes. We continued our skit, then I said I had to leave the candy jar here. So tomorrow we can try it and go out pranking everyone with our new superpower. I winked and everyone nodded. Now, where did Silas go again? I asked, and everyone shook their heads. Then I picked up an apple and purposely dropped it on the floor, then immediately peered underneath the table to look for it while pretending not to see Silas down there. He looked absolutely amazed, trying not to make any sound. Now Silas thought he was truly invisible. He crawled out, then did all sorts of funny things in front of us, from dancing, shaking his butt, and cartwheeling across the room. It was so hard to keep a straight face and ignore his existence. Then, at 6 p.m., Silas left the house with a backpack on. But because he thought he was invisible, he ran straight past us without hesitation, and didn't forget to stick his tongue out at me before leaving. This idiot. We followed him, and guess what? He went to the abandoned house. We hid behind a tree to watch, and suddenly the door creaked open. I was a little creeped out, so I clung to Ellie's arm. Someone ran over to him. A little girl. Oh no, was it a ghost? Ellie said, OMG, she's in my clothes! I looked closer and realized she wasn't a ghost, but in fact, was a real-life girl. So Silas hid that little girl in our abandoned house, and that's why he kept telling us over and over again not to come here. Since Silas thought that he was invisible, he kept running around her saying, you can't see me, right? He looked so funny as the little girl was too bewildered to understand anything. And right then we barged in shouting, gotcha! Well, well, well. Look who's the big guy hiding his girlfriend here. I pulled out Silas's backpack, which was filled with Snickers bars and other missing items. Silas was shocked and sputtered, it's not what you think. The little girl burst into tears and said, I'm Sally. I got lost, so Silas helped me. Silas said that he had met Sally one day on the cornfield. She was alone and hungry, so he brought her here and took care of her. He didn't dare tell us because he was afraid that we would make fun of him. Oh, I didn't think that my usual foolish brother was able to do such a good thing. So I hugged them and said, I don't blame anyone, Silas. You did a very good job, and Sally, you will be safe here. Take her to our house and I will call someone for help. Fortunately, the police said that they were also looking for a missing child, and the next day, Sally was reunited with her parents. It turned out she was at a crowded train station when she ended up lost. Confused, she followed a man with the same shirt as her father, and that's how she ended up lost in our fields. Yeah, my brother is a bit annoying at times, but he's a good kid with a kind heart. Since then, we've grown closer, and I used my savings to reward my brother with a console of his very own. As for me and Ellie, well, let's just say our relationship is still in the friend zone for now. But Carl might have noticed something, and he didn't seem to oppose it. So just give me time and wish me luck.